The old county courthouse stood like a monument to a town that had forgotten how to breathe. Weathered bricks, cracked columns, and tall wooden doors whispered stories of trials long past. But none of those stories carried the tension that swelled within its walls that morning. Cameras lined the steps outside. Reporters shouted over one another, their voices sharp against the cold air. A sea of microphones and flashing lights surrounded the building, all waiting for the same moment, the testimony of a 3-year-old girl in a case that had split the town in half. Inside, the courtroom felt suffocating. The polished oak benches were filled to capacity, neighbors, strangers, even off-duty officers, all drawn by the gravity of what was about to unfold. The air conditioner hummed overhead, a low mechanical growl that somehow made the silence heavier. At the defense table sat Officer Daniel Harkins, his blue uniform pressed, his badge gleaming under the courtroom lights. He looked composed on the surface, but his fingers betrayed him, drumming against the table in a restless rhythm. Every now and then he glanced toward the double doors, waiting for someone, though he wasn't sure if he wanted them to arrive. Beside him sat his K9 partner, Rex, the town's most decorated police dog. The German shepherd sat tall and quiet, eyes alert, calm. He didn't understand the murmurs, the accusations, or the weight that hung in the air, only that his handler was tense and the room smelled of anxiety. When his ears twitched at a sudden sound, a dropped pen, a shifting chair, every head turned toward him. The once beloved police dog had become a symbol of controversy, the living reminder of a night everyone wished they could forget. Across the aisle, Maya Miles sat at the prosecutor's table, her expression a fragile mask of control. Grief clung to her like a second skin. Dressed in black, she seemed smaller than the woman she once was, yet there was a quiet fire in her eyes. The death of her husband, Ethan Miles, had turned her into something else, a mother seeking truth in a town determined to bury it. At her side sat Lily, their daughter, the tiny figure at the center of this storm. The child's legs barely reached the edge of her chair, and she clutched a worn stuffed bunny, its ear dangling by a thread. Her innocence stood in painful contrast to the solemn faces surrounding her. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose in unison. His presence commanded the room, though even he seemed weary of the spectacle. "You may be seated," he said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. A gavel struck once sharp, final. The trial of the year had resumed. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, her tone respectful but firm. "Today the state calls its youngest and final witness, Lily Miles." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, quickly hushed by a glare from the judge. The journalists shifted in their seats. Cameras were banned inside, but every detail would be relayed to the world by evening. Officer Harkins's lawyer, a sharp man in a gray suit, rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is 3 years old. She's incapable of providing reliable testimony." The prosecutor stood her ground. "With respect, the child has been evaluated by a licensed psychologist and deemed capable of recalling relevant observations. The defense has already reviewed the report." The judge adjusted his glasses. "The objection is overruled. The court will hear from the witness. Proceed with caution." The doors creaked open. A hush fell as Lily entered, holding her mother's hand. She wore a pale yellow dress, the kind a grandmother might have chosen for Easter Sunday, and her curls framed her face like a halo. Every eye followed her small steps down the aisle. Some people smiled softly, others frowned, unsure whether this was justice or cruelty. Maya led her to the witness stand, whispering words of comfort that only Lily could hear. The little girl nodded solemnly, then turned to the bailiff, who raised a small Bible. "Do you promise to tell the truth?" he asked gently. Lily hesitated, her thumb brushing the edge of her bunny's ear. "I promise," she whispered. The court collectively exhaled. From his seat, Harkins couldn't look away. The girl's face was hauntingly familiar. He remembered her from that night, the tiny silhouette framed by flashing blue lights, standing in the doorway as her world collapsed. He had seen many faces in his years of service, but none like hers. Something in her eyes, a blend of fear and innocence, had stayed with him ever since. "Lily," the prosecutor began softly, kneeling to meet her gaze, "do you remember the night the police came to your house?" Lily's eyes darted toward the corner of the room where Rex sat quietly beside his handler. Her expression changed recognition, confusion, and something else. "That's the doggy," she said, pointing. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's raised hand. "Yes," the prosecutor said carefully. "That's Rex. Can you tell us what you remember about him that night?" Lily blinked, thinking. "He was scared," she said finally. Her words were so simple, so pure, that it took everyone a moment to process them. He didn't want to be bad. Someone yelled mean, and then he did it. The prosecutor froze. "He did what, Lily?" Lily looked down at her bunny. "He bit Daddy." A few gasps echoed. The judge leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Maya's grip tightened on her chair, but she stayed silent. The defense attorney shifted uncomfortably, scribbling notes he'd never use. "Lily," the prosecutor continued gently, "do you remember who yelled?" The child hesitated, her tiny brow furrowed. "It wasn't him," she said, glancing at Harkins. "It was another man. He sounded mad." The room stirred like a living thing. Reporters whispered to each other. Harkins froze, his breath catching. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something urgent, but the officer didn't hear it. His mind was already spiraling back to that night, the chaos, the rain, the flash of red and blue lights. He remembered hearing the command to release Rex, but it hadn't come from his lips. He remembered freezing, unsure if he'd imagined it. And then screams. The prosecutor pressed on, sensing the shift. "Lily, can you tell us what happened after that?" She shook her head. "Mommy screamed. The doggy ran away. Daddy fell." Her voice trembled on the last word, and a collective ache swept the room. Even the judge seemed to soften. The child's testimony wasn't perfect. It wasn't legal gold, but it carried a raw, human truth that pierced through the courtroom's walls. Then, unexpectedly, Rex let out a quiet whine. It wasn't loud, but in that charged silence, it felt deafening. He stood, ears perked, tail low, and looked straight at Lily. The bailiff moved instinctively to hold his leash, but the dog didn't lunge or bark. He simply stared, eyes locked on the little girl who had just spoken his name. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Lily smiled faintly. "He remembers Daddy," she said softly. And that was when the entire courtroom went silent. The judge cleared his throat, visibly shaken. "We will take a recess," he said, his voice cracking for the first time that day. The gavel struck twice. As people rose, whispers filled the air again, only now they carried a different tone. Doubt, curiosity, fear. Maya lifted Lily from the witness stand, hugging her tightly. The child rested her head on her mother's shoulder. Unaware, she had just cracked the calm veneer of an entire legal system. At the defense table, Harkins remained seated. His lawyer spoke rapidly beside him, but he heard nothing. He stared at Rex, who still faced the empty witness stand, ears twitching as if waiting for another voice to call him. Harkins felt something shift deep inside, something he had buried under orders, loyalty, and silence. He didn't know it yet, but the trial had just changed direction. The truth buried under reports and politics had found its way into the open, carried by the one person no one had expected to matter. A 3-year-old with a stuffed bunny, and the courage to tell the world that even the innocent remember. The rain that night didn't fall. It slammed against the streets like it had something to prove. Sheets of water blurred the edges of the small Ohio town, swallowing streetlights in hazy pools of gold. Wipers beat furiously against windshields, and thunder rolled over rooftops, shaking the town awake. Officer Daniel Harkins gripped the steering wheel of his patrol SUV, eyes narrowed on the flashing coordinates on his dashboard. Beside him, Rex, his canine partner, whined softly, restless from the storm and the tension thickening inside the vehicle. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. We're responding to the burglary report on Willow Avenue." "House number?" Harkins's voice crackled through the radio. Static, then a reply. "Copy that, 7, 421 Willow. Homeowner called about movement in the kitchen. Possible break-in. Copy." He turned onto Willow, tires splashing through puddles. The houses here were nearly identical white fences, manicured lawns, the quiet perfection of suburban safety. The kind of place where bad things weren't supposed to happen. Rex's ears twitched as lightning illuminated the street. Harkins slowed. "Easy, boy," he muttered. "Just a routine call." But it wasn't. At 421 Willow Avenue, Ethan Miles fumbled with a key in the dark, soaked to the bone. He was exhausted 2 double shifts back to back at the construction site. His mind was fogged with fatigue, his hands trembling from cold and frustration. He hadn't realized he'd turned onto the wrong street. His house 423 Willow was only 2 doors down. But to him, in the blur of exhaustion and rain, every home looked the same. He finally got the door open and stumbled inside. The house was dark, unfamiliar. Still, his mind didn't process it. "Maya?" He called softly, setting his lunchbox on the counter. "You up?" No answer. He took a few steps in. The floor creaked under his boots. He didn't notice the framed pictures on the wall, smiling faces he didn't recognize. He just wanted to collapse. The smell of cinnamon candles drifted faintly from the living room. For a moment, he almost smiled. "You lit candles?" He murmured. A shadow moved in the hallway. "Who's there?" He called, voice rising. And from the other end, a terrified voice answered. "Get out of my house. I'm calling 911. Ethan froze. The words sliced through the fog in his mind. His heart lurched. "Wait, no, ma'am. It's a mistake." The sound of a phone slamming down cut him off. He realized what had happened, horror washing over him. Oh, God. He bolted for the door. No, no, no. Outside, red and blue lights flashed through the rain. Harkins pulled up to the curb, engine still running. He scanned the property, hand instinctively reaching for his flashlight. "Stay," he told Rex, though the dog's body was already taut, waiting. The dispatcher's voice came through again, low and urgent. "Be advised homeowner is alone. Believes intruder still inside." Harkins's pulse quickened. He'd handled hundreds of calls like this, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the fatigue from endless overtime. Or maybe it was the quiet voice in the back of his mind, whispering that something about this address felt wrong. He drew his weapon, signaled for backup that hadn't yet arrived, and moved toward the door. "Police! Announce yourself!" He shouted. Rain drowned his words. The front door creaked open. The intruder hadn't locked it behind him. He stepped inside. The house was dimly lit, shadows dancing against the walls. "Police!" He called again, his voice echoing through the silence. From the kitchen, he heard movement. Ethan turned, hands raised. "Hey! Wait, it's a mistake. I live here, no, I live." Harkins's training took over. "Show me your hands." On the ground. I'm not pleased, listen. Ethan's words tumbled out in desperation. My wife, my kid, I'm just tired, Rex barked sharply from the doorway, the sound ricocheting off the walls. Lightning flashed again. Somewhere outside, a second car door slammed. Harkins's heart thudded in his chest. He could hear another voice, his commanding officer, Sergeant Cole, arriving on scene. Cole's voice boomed through the radio, impatient and clipped. Take control, Harkins. Don't let him move. Ethan took one step backward, palms trembling. Please, I'm not. And then it happened. Attack. The word cut through the noise like a bullet. Rex lunged. Harkins froze, his mind blank. He hadn't given the command, but the word, sharp, familiar, authoritative, had come from behind him. Cole, wait! He shouted, but it was too late. Rex tackled Ethan, knocking him to the floor. Shouting filled the kitchen orders, cries, chaos. Harkins tried to pull Rex back, but adrenaline blurred everything. Ethan screamed. Harkins finally managed to grab the leash, forcing Rex to release. Blood spread across the linoleum like a dark halo. Ethan gasped, clutching his side. Please, my wife. His voice faded. Cole was already speaking into his radio, calm and cold. Suspect down. Possible fatal wound. Send medical. Harkins's hands shook. He wasn't resisting, he said hoarsely. He was scared. He tried to explain. Cole shot him a look, one that silenced argument. Write it the way I tell you. You hesitated. You gave the command. You understand? Harkins's stomach turned. But, sir, Cole stepped closer, voice low, venomous. You want your career over this? You want Rex put down? Do what I say. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the two men's faces, one rigid with authority, the other collapsing under the weight of obedience. Sirens wailed in the distance. Harkins looked at Ethan lying on the floor, his chest barely rising. He pressed down on the wound, whispering, "Stay with me." But deep down, he already knew. Across town, Maya woke to the sound of pounding on her door. Her first thought was Ethan. He was supposed to be home an hour ago. She ran barefoot to the entryway, heart in her throat. When she opened it, two uniformed officers stood there, soaked and somber. "Mrs. Miles?" one asked softly. The world tilted. The words after that blurred. Incident. Hospital. Sorry. Her knees buckled. She didn't remember being driven to the station, didn't remember the questions, the sterile room, or the smell of rain on her coat. What she did remember was seeing Ethan's watch in a sealed evidence bag hours later cracked glass, blood smeared across the face, and knowing her life had split in two. The next morning, news spread like wildfire. Officer-involved fatality. The words blazed across screens and newspapers. The department released a statement, calling it a tragic misunderstanding during a high-risk call. Harkins's name was withheld, but whispers spread fast in small towns. Some blamed Ethan, shouldn't have been sneaking into houses. Others blamed the police, too quick to shoot, too proud to listen. But most people just avoided talking about it at all. Harkins sat in his car in the station parking lot. The rain finally stopped, though the sky remained gray. Rex sat in the back seat, tail still, gaze fixed on his handler through the metal cage. The dog whined once, as if sensing his confusion. Harkins turned off the engine and stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes looked older, tired. He thought of Ethan's face, of the command he didn't give, and the silence that followed. He thought of Cole's warning. You hesitated. You'll take the fall. He wanted to speak, to tell the truth, but the machine had already started moving. Reports were filed. Evidence sealed. The official narrative locked in place. When he went home that night, he sat on the floor beside Rex, running his hands through the dog's fur. "You didn't do anything wrong," he whispered. Rex rested his head on Harkins's knee, eyes heavy with loyalty that asked for nothing in return. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, Harkins didn't sleep. 3 days later, Maya stood at Ethan's funeral, rain falling again like the sky refused to stop mourning. Lily clung to her mother's dress, too young to understand why everyone cried. When the casket was lowered, Maya whispered through tears, "I'll find out what really happened." Her voice trembled, but her words were a vow. In the distance, hidden behind a tree line, Harkins watched. He shouldn't have come, but he did anyway. His uniform felt like a disguise. The sight of the child Lily clutching her mother's hand burned into his mind. He turned away as Rex barked softly from the car, as if urging him to go. But before he did, he whispered something into the rain. "I'm sorry." He didn't know then that the child he saw, the one holding the stuffed bunny, would one day stand in front of him in court, speak a single sentence, and unravel every lie that night had buried. The morning after the funeral, the sky hung low and colorless over Willow Creek. The storm had passed, but it left behind an unnatural stillness, like the world itself was holding its breath. The town that once adored the Miles family now whispered about them in hushed tones. Some said Ethan's death was an unfortunate mistake. Others said he must have done something to provoke it. Maya Miles sat by the window, her coffee untouched, staring at the wilted bouquet left by a neighbor who hadn't stayed long enough to say anything meaningful. The house was too quiet. Even the clock on the wall seemed hesitant to tick. Lily slept in her room, curled up with her bunny, unaware that her father's laughter would never echo through these halls again. When the knock came, Maya didn't move. She already knew who it was. Mrs. Miles? The voice was calm, low, practiced. A woman stood at the door, a lawyer in her mid-30s with rain-damp hair pulled into a bun and eyes sharp, enough to cut through any lie. Her name was Alicia. Ward, a civil rights attorney from Denver who'd read about Ethan's death in a local paper. "I'm sorry for your loss," Alicia said softly. "I know this isn't the best time, but I think we need to talk about what happened that night." Maya hesitated. "The police already talked to me." "I'm not the police," Alicia replied. "And I think they're leaving things out." In a dimly lit diner on the edge of town, Alicia spread photographs across the table crime scene shots, witness statements, inconsistencies in the timeline. Her voice was steady, but her tone carried an undercurrent of fire. "Look here," she said, pointing to a time stamp. "Dispatch shows that Officer Harkins reported a nonviolent suspect. But 7 minutes later, Sergeant Cole logs the command for K9 engagement. That means the order came after confirmation the suspect wasn't resisting." Maya stared at the images, Ethan's blood, the overturned chair, the leash. Why would they lie? Alicia leaned back, eyes weary. Because a bad command in a small town ruins more than reputations. It ends careers, bankrupts cities, and destroys trust. They'll say your husband moved suddenly, reached for something, anything to justify it. Maya's jaw clenched. "He didn't even have time to breathe," Alicia nodded. "Then let's make them answer for it." While Maya prepared for the fight of her life, Officer Harkins found himself unraveling. The department had closed ranks, just as Cole promised. Internal Affairs cleared the officers within days, citing appropriate use of force. The official story was airtight on paper, at least. But Harkins couldn't sleep. Every night, he saw Ethan's face in the dark, the way his eyes had widened, not in aggression but disbelief. He'd started visiting Rex at the kennel after the department temporarily pulled the dog from active duty. The visits were the only moments that calmed him. "You did what you were trained to do," he would whisper through the metal gate. None of this is your fault. Still, Rex had changed too. The once eager K9 now sat silent and withdrawn, eyes following Harkins with a strange, almost human sadness. One afternoon, Harkins was called into Cole's office. The sergeant's. Walls were lined with commendations, photographs of training exercises, and a framed quote that read, "Discipline wins wars." Cole didn't look up when Harkins entered. "They're reopening the civil case," Cole said, flipping through paperwork. "The widow's got herself a lawyer." Harkins said nothing. "She tried to paint you as reckless, emotional weak," Cole continued. "Don't let her. Stick to the report." "What if the report's wrong?" Harkins asked quietly. Cole's head snapped up. "Excuse me? What if he really didn't do anything?" "What if?" Cole stood, stepping close enough for Harkins to feel the heat of his breath. "You listen to me, officer. You want to play conscience now? Fine. But don't drag this department down with you. You gave the command. That's the story. That's how it stays." Harkins's throat tightened. "You gave it, sir." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Careful." Across town, Maya and Alicia built their case brick by brick. They dug through dispatch logs, subpoenaed training manuals, even tracked down a former K9 handler who'd left the department 2 years earlier. His name was Tom Reeves, and he'd once worked directly under Cole. When Alicia found him living in a trailer park outside Boulder, he hesitated to talk. "You don't mess with Cole," he warned. "That man buries people. But yeah, he cuts corners. He pushes his dogs too far." There was an incident before, same pattern. Cole gives the order, but blames the handler. Alicia's pulse quickened. Was it covered up? Reeves nodded. Internal report vanished overnight. That was the crack they needed. The courtroom was packed the day the trial began. Cameras lined the back, flashing like lightning. Reporters scribbled notes as Maya entered, clutching a framed photo of Ethan and Lily. On the opposite side, Harkins sat at the defense table, his uniform pressed, his face pale. Cole sat behind him, expression unreadable. Judge Halpern, an aging man with sharp features, called for order. "We're here to determine the circumstances surrounding the death of Ethan Miles." Alicia opened with precision. "This is not about a dangerous suspect," she began. "It's about a man who was executed in his own kitchen, and a system that told everyone involved to stay quiet." Her words cut through the room like thunder. When Harkins took the stand, the silence was heavy enough to feel. Alicia approached slowly, her heels echoing against the marble floor. "Officer Harkins," she said, "do you recall the night of March 12th? "Yes," he murmured. "You stated in your report that you gave the command for the K9 to engage. Is that true?" He hesitated. Cole's gaze bore into the back of his head. "Yes. Why?" "Because the suspect resisted." Alicia's eyebrow lifted. "Resisted?" "The coroner's report says Ethan Miles had no defensive wounds, no weapon, no drugs in his system. Just a man standing in his kitchen. So I'll ask again, why did you give the command?" Harkins's hands trembled. "Because I was told to." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cole's jaw clenched. Alicia stepped closer. "Told to by whom?" Harkins's eyes darted to his superior. Cole's expression didn't waver, but there was a flicker just enough. "Sergeant Cole," Harkins said finally, voice cracking. "He ordered it. I tried to stop the dog, but it was too late." The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Order!" Cole shot to his feet. "He's lying. He's trying to save himself." But the damage was done. The cameras caught it all, the flicker of guilt, the flash of rage, the truth finally piercing the veil of command. That night, Maya sat in her car outside the courthouse, trembling. She wasn't sure if she'd won or lost yet, but for the first time since Ethan's death, she felt something unfamiliar control. Alicia joined her, holding a folder of documents. They'll drag this out for months, she said. Appeals, countersuits, reputation attacks, you name it. But Harkins's testimony changes everything. The truth is finally in daylight. Maya nodded slowly. He looked broken. He is, Alicia replied. But maybe that's the first honest thing anyone's done since this began. Maya looked at her reflection in the rain-streaked window. I don't want revenge, she whispered. I just want my daughter to know her father wasn't what they said he was. Alicia smiled faintly. And that's what we'll prove. Back at the station, Cole sat alone in his office, staring at the empty desk across from him, the one that used to hold Harkins's reports. The phone on his desk blinked with missed calls from the chief, the union, the DA's office. For the first time, Cole didn't pick it up. Outside, the storm clouds gathered again, rolling low over Willow Creek as if the sky itself remembered what it had witnessed. And somewhere across town, little Lily stirred in her sleep. Her mother's voice murmured softly from the next room, steady and sure. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, truth had teeth. The courthouse buzzed like a beehive the next morning. Reporters lined the marble steps, their cameras flashing beneath a bruised gray sky. The case of Miles v. Willow Creek Police Department had already become a national spectacle, an emblem of small-town power and one woman's defiance. Inside, the tension was almost unbearable. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and nerves. The jury filed in, silent, their expressions guarded. Officer Harkins sat rigid at the defense table, his uniform collar damp with sweat. Behind him, Sergeant Cole whispered to his attorney, every movement calculated, controlled. And in the front row, Maya Miles sat with her daughter, Lily, perched on her lap. The little girl's fingers toyed with a small stuffed bunny, its fur worn, its ears stitched from the night she'd cried herself to sleep for weeks. Maya had tried to leave Lily with a friend, but the child refused. I want to see Daddy's dog, she'd said. At first, Maya didn't understand. Then she realized what the prosecution had planned for that day's testimony, and her stomach tightened. Alicia Ward stood as Judge Halpern entered. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Officer Daniel Harkins back to the stand for cross-examination. Cole's lawyer objected, claiming harassment, but the judge waved him off. Overruled, proceed. Harkins rose slowly, eyes hollow. Since his confession, he'd been suspended without pay, living in the thin air between guilt and relief. Every night, he replayed that storm, the shout, the command, the scream, and wondered if he'd done enough to stop it. Alicia began softly. Officer Harkins, you testified that you attempted to stop your K-9, Rex, after realizing the suspect was unarmed. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And that Sergeant Cole ordered the release, despite your protest? Yes, Alicia paused. Where is Rex now? Harkins's eyes flickered. The department impounded him. Standard protocol after an incident. Would you recognize him? Of course. Then, Alicia turned to the judge. With your permission, the prosecution would like to introduce Exhibit K9A, demonstration requested by the defense to confirm behavioral control. The room shifted. A murmur rolled through the benches. Even Cole looked startled. A bailiff exited, and moments later, the heavy doors swung open. Rex padded into the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. The big German shepherd moved gracefully, his coat glinting under the courtroom lights. He wore a soft leather harness instead of the standard issue muzzle Alicia's conditioned for the demonstration. The handler guiding him wasn't a cop, but a neutral animal behaviorist brought in by the court. Lily gasped quietly. That's Daddy's dog, she whispered, eyes wide. Rex's ears twitched. He turned his head toward the sound of movement, so subtle most people missed it, but not Maya. Her heart skipped. The handler led Rex to the center of the room. He's been calm since arrival, she told the judge. But K9 South often responds strongly to familiar voices or scents. Proceed, said the judge. Alicia took a few cautious steps forward. Officer Harkins, would you describe the command that triggered the attack? Harkins swallowed hard. It was secure. That's the word we used for controlled apprehension. Rex would respond instantly. Would you mind demonstrating the tone, not the command itself? Just the tone? Harkins hesitated. He might react. Just the tone, not the word, Alicia reassured. He nodded, cleared his throat, and called softly. Rex, stay. The dog's head lifted, muscles tensing slightly, then relaxing. Controlled. Obedient. A model K9. The jury murmured, impressed. Then something happened that wasn't planned. Lily, sitting in her mother's lap, whispered again, this time a little louder. Hi, Poppy. Rex froze. His ears perked. Slowly, deliberately, he turned toward her. His tail gave one uncertain wag. Lily, Maya whispered, panicking. Stay quiet, sweetheart. But Lily had already slipped off her mother's lap. Tiny shoes tapped across the polished floor, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. Miss Miles, please, the judge began, but the little girl had already reached the center aisle. Rex stood perfectly still, eyes fixed on her. Hi, puppy, Lily said again. You remember me? Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the dog stepped forward slow, cautious, his claws clicking softly. The handler moved to intervene, but Alicia raised a hand. Wait. Rex reached the child and stopped. His massive head lowered until his nose brushed the bunny clutched in her arms. The room held its breath. And then, impossibly, Rex whimpered. The sound broke something in everyone present. The jury shifted. Even the judge leaned forward, lips parted. Lily reached out and touched his fur. It's okay, she said softly. You didn't mean to hurt Daddy. The handler knelt, stunned. He's recognizing her scent. This dog associates her family with safety, not threat. Cole's attorney jumped to his feet. Objection. Emotional manipulation. But the damage was already done. Rex gently lay down beside Lily, head resting on her lap as though in surrender. And from his seat, Officer Harkins bowed his head, tears spilling down his face. The judge called a brief recess. The moment the gavel struck, the courtroom erupted. Reporters whispered furiously, jurors exchanged looks, and Cole stormed out, his jaw set like granite. In the hallway, Maya knelt before her daughter. Sweetheart, why did you do that? Lily smiled faintly. He looked sad. Maya's throat tightened. You're just like your father, she whispered. Back inside, the afternoon session began under a completely different tone. The defense rattled, tried to regain control. Cole's attorney argued that emotions had no place in justice. But Alicia knew better emotion was justice in motion. She stood again, her voice sharp as a blade. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you saw today wasn't an accident. That dog's reaction wasn't confusion. It was recognition. He knew that child. He remembered her home, her father, and the night this tragedy occurred. She turned toward the defense table. Sergeant Cole wants you to believe that Ethan Miles was a threat. Yet even the animal trained to attack him recognized innocence. Cole glared at her, fists clenched. This is outrageous. Outrageous, Alicia cut in, is sending a dog on a man standing in his own kitchen. The gavel struck again. Order. After court adjourned, the parking lot outside was swarmed with media vans. Microphones thrust into faces, cameras caught tears and smiles. The story was no longer about a police procedure gone wrong. It was about truth clawing its way into daylight. Inside a quiet corner of the building, Harkins found Maya. He stood there awkwardly, hat in hand. I didn't know she'd do that, he said, nodding toward the courtroom doors. Maya smiled weakly. Neither did I. She reminded him, Harkins murmured, that he wasn't born to hurt people. He was trained to obey. Maya studied him for a moment. And you? She asked softly. Were you trained to obey too? He met her eyes haunted, exhausted. I was, but I'm trying to unlearn it. For the first time, she believed him. That night, the footage aired nationwide. Social media exploded. The image of a little girl comforting a police dog who'd killed her father became a symbol, a mirror for everything wrong and everything hopeful in the world. Public opinion shifted overnight. Petitions flooded the district attorney's office demanding Cole's removal and a full federal inquiry. Even the chief of police distanced himself from his sergeant. Cole, meanwhile, watched the news from his darkened office. His reflection stared back from the television screen, a man unraveling in real time. The phone rang again and again, but he didn't answer. In another part of town, Harkins sat in the kennel beside Rex, the chain-link shadows crossing both their faces. You did good today, he whispered. You reminded them who you really are. Rex looked up, resting his head against Harkins's leg. For the first time in months, the officer smiled, small, fragile, but real. A week later, the court reconvened for closing arguments. The air was electric, like the calm before a storm. Everyone knew the case had changed morally, emotionally, maybe even historically. Alicia stood tall before the jury. We can't undo that night, she said. We can't give Lily her father back. But we can tell the truth. Ethan Miles wasn't a suspect. He was a victim of arrogance, of authority, of silence. And if justice means anything, it must mean accountability. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, but she didn't falter. Don't let fear decide this case. Let humanity decide it. As the jury filed out, Maya held Lily's hand. The little girl looked up, her eyes bright. Mommy, did we help Daddy? Maya smiled through her tears. Yes, baby. You helped more than anyone. Lily squeezed her hand tighter. Even the puppy? Especially the puppy, Maya whispered. Outside, the first light rain began to fall soft, cleansing, alive. For once, Willow Creek didn't feel haunted. It felt like something new was beginning. And somewhere, in that fragile silence between thunder and truth, justice stirred. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It came and went in waves, soft mist in the mornings, heavy sheets by dusk. To the people of Willow Creek, it felt like the sky was trying to wash the town clean, but no one knew if it ever truly could. Inside the courthouse, the air was taut, alive with nervous anticipation. The trial had lasted 6 long weeks, but this moment, this verdict felt heavier than all of them combined. Every bench was filled, every reporter ready, their pens poised like weapons. On one side sat Maya Miles and her attorney, Alicia Ward. On the other sat Officer Harkins. Alone now, his attorney had advised him not to expect protection from the department after his testimony. And behind them, Sergeant Cole sat motionless, jaw clenched, hands folded so tightly his knuckles were white. Judge Halpern entered and took his seat, his expression grave. Members of the jury, he began, have you reached a verdict? A foreperson, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, stood. We have, Your Honor. The silence that followed was the kind that seemed to press down on every soul in the room. In the case of Miles versus the Willow Creek Police Department, we find the department liable for wrongful death. Maya closed her eyes, her hand flying to her mouth. The words barely seemed real. And in the case of Sergeant Nathan Cole, the foreperson continued, voice trembling slightly, We find the defendant guilty of misconduct and falsifying reports in an active investigation. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, a burst of relief from Maya that turned into quiet sobbing as Alicia wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Reporters bolted for the doors, shouting into their phones. Harkins sat frozen, the breath leaving his body like air from a punctured tire. Cole, meanwhile, stood rigid. His eyes darted from the jury to the judge, disbelief carved across his face. "You can't," he started, but the bailiff stepped closer, a silent warning. Judge Halpern's voice cut through the noise. "Order. This court will have order." The gavel struck like thunder. Cole's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but Cole didn't seem to hear. He was staring straight at Maya, and for the first time, there was no anger in his gaze, only something hollow, almost human. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath, so low only Harkins caught it. Outside, the courthouse steps had transformed into a sea of flashing lights and microphones. The verdict spread like wildfire across news networks. A small-town mother wins landmark case against local police. The story transcended borders. It wasn't just about Willow Creek anymore. It was about power, truth, and the courage of ordinary people. Maya stood before the cameras, wind tugging at her hair, rain misting her face. Alicia stood beside her, speaking first. "Today's verdict isn't vengeance, it's accountability," she said. "It's proof that the law can still serve the people when the people refuse to be silent." Maya stepped forward then, her voice quiet but firm. "My husband was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened. No family should. I hope this verdict means no one else will have to explain to their child why their father isn't coming home." Lily peeked out from behind her mother's coat, clutching her bunny, her wide eyes reflecting the camera flashes. She didn't understand the magnitude of what had happened, only that everyone seemed to be crying and smiling at the same time. That night, the town was unrecognizable. The bar on Main Street, where police officers once laughed over beers, was eerily empty. The diner where Ethan used to eat breakfast had taped a sign to the window that read, "Justice for the Miles family." But in the darkness, not everyone was celebrating. In a dimly lit motel on the outskirts of town, Cole sat alone on the edge of his bed. The television flickered before him footage of himself, leaving the courthouse in handcuffs replaying on loop. His reflection in the screen looked older, meaner, unfamiliar. He poured a drink, his hand shaking. "You ruined me," he whispered, not at the screen, but at the world itself. "All of you." There was a knock at the door. He didn't answer at first. The knock came again, 2 short raps, firm, deliberate. Finally, he rose, opening it just enough to see the figure standing outside. It was a man in a plain suit, no introduction. He held a small envelope. "From downtown," the man said. "You didn't get this from me." Cole hesitated, then snatched it and slammed the door. Inside the envelope were photographs, grainy stills from the night of the incident. One showed Harkins standing over Ethan's body. Another showed Rex, teeth bared. And in the corner of one frame, the faint reflection of Cole in the kitchen window, his hand raised, mouth open mid-command. Cole stared at them for a long time. Then he began to smile a cold, bitter smile. "So they want to play that game," he muttered. Across town, Harkins sat in his car outside the kennel. The rain pattered softly on the windshield. He hadn't seen Rex since the trial, but now the gate was unlocked, and the caretaker had left him a message. "You might want to come tonight." Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly. Rex sat in his cage, head tilted, eyes brightening the moment he saw his old handler. Harkins knelt, reaching through the bars. "Hey, boy," he said, his voice breaking. "You're free now. They said they're retiring you, rehoming you somewhere safe." Rex pressed his head against his palm, a low whine escaping his throat. Harkins smiled weakly. I wish I could say the same for me. In the days that followed, the media storm intensified. Civil rights groups praised the verdict, while law enforcement unions condemned it as a dangerous precedent. The chief of police resigned under public pressure, and Cole's name became a symbol of everything wrong with unchecked authority. But for Maya, the noise didn't matter. She spent her days quietly, walking Lily to preschool, keeping the blinds half open, learning to breathe again. The house still held echoes of Ethan, his favorite jacket by the door, his coffee mug on the counter. But now, those memories hurt a little less. One evening, as the sun dipped low, there was a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, she froze. It was Harkins, in plain clothes this time, holding a leash. Maya's breath caught. Rex? The German shepherd stood beside him, tail wagging hesitantly. His eyes met hers, gentle, remorseful, familiar. I thought you might want to see him, Harkins said quietly. They cleared him for adoption. I figured. Maybe he should be somewhere he remembers kindness. For a moment, Maya couldn't speak. Then she crouched down, reaching for the dog. Hey, boy, she whispered. Rex pressed his head into her shoulder, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. Lily appeared in the doorway, gasping. Mommy, it's Daddy's puppy. Maya smiled through tears. Yes, baby. It's Daddy's puppy. Rex leaned closer, licking Lily's cheek, and for the first time in months, laughter filled the Miles house again. Harkins stood silently, watching. I'm leaving town, he said finally. Starting over somewhere no one knows my name. Maya rose, looking at him. You did the right thing, officer. He shook his head. No, I just stopped doing the wrong thing. She nodded, understanding more than words could say. Thank you for bringing him home. He hesitated, then gave a small nod before turning to go. As he walked down the path, the sound of Lily's giggles followed him, mingling with the rain. That night, Cole watched the same scene unfold on the evening news. Rex reunited with the Miles family. The reporter's voice was syrupy with sentiment. A bittersweet ending for Willow Creek's most talked-about case. Cole turned off the TV. His reflection stared back from the blank screen, eyes hollow, heart poisoned by fury. He opened the envelope again, studying the photos. Then he pulled out one more, a blurry shot of Harkins at Maya's door. The storm outside deepened. Wind howled against the windows, shaking the frame. Cole poured another drink, whispering to himself, if they think this is over, they're wrong. But in the Miles household, a different kind of silence settled. Not the silence of grief, but of peace. Maya sat by the window, Lily asleep on her lap, Rex curled at her feet. The rain tapped gently on the glass, steady and soothing. For the first time since that awful night, the world didn't feel cruel. It felt possible. She whispered into the quiet. We made it, Ethan. She's safe. We're safe. Outside, lightning flickered far off in the distance. And though the storm still lingered beyond the hills, Willow Creek slept beneath it, changed, scarred, but finally, undeniably awake. The storm that had rolled through Willow Creek a month earlier had given way to unseasonable calm. The days were warmer now, the air crisp with the scent of pine and thawing earth. On the surface, everything seemed still too still, like the silence that comes before a gunshot. Maya Miles had begun to smile again. The nightmares had eased, and laughter returned to her small home at the end of Birchwood Lane. She'd started working part-time at the community library, shelving books while Lily colored pictures at a corner table. Sometimes Rex lay beside the child, his great head resting near her tiny hands, the picture of serenity. People would stop and stare, some recognizing the dog from the trial. Maya always smiled politely and said the same thing, he's family now. But beneath the surface, unseen forces stirred. There were whispers at the precinct, murmurs about Cole as appeal, his contacts, the secrets he might spill. The department wanted distance, but they also wanted quiet. And when men like Cole felt cornered, quiet was never an option. It began one evening in a gas station parking lot just outside town. A security camera caught a man in a hooded coat refueling an old, unregistered pickup. He paid in cash, face obscured, but there was something deliberate about his movements. He didn't look lost or desperate. He looked patient, like someone rehearsing. That night, a fire broke out at the abandoned training yard on the north side of town, the same yard where Cole once commanded Rex. Witnesses said they heard shouting before the explosion, but by the time firefighters arrived, the place was ash. On one of the scorched walls, someone had painted a single word in red spray paint: Liar. 2 days later, Harkins got the call. He was living 3 towns over now, working at a mechanic shop, trying to stay invisible. But when the voice on the other end said, "There's been an incident," his gut clenched. He drove back to Willow Creek under cover of darkness. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt, as though the town itself knew what was coming. At the edge of town, a deputy flagged him down. "You're not supposed to be here," the deputy warned, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "I heard about the fire," Harkins said. "Was it Cole?" The deputy swallowed hard. "They found tire tracks. Partial prints. We can't confirm, but—" He trailed off, then whispered, "They say he's out." Harkins froze. Out, as in released? Technically on bail. But the judge made it clear he's under supervision. Harkins shook his head. Supervision? You don't supervise a man like Cole. You cage him. That same night, Maya felt it too, the unease creeping at the edges of her peace. She had just put Lily to bed when Rex lifted his head suddenly, ears perked. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, peering through the window. The yard was dark, but the old oak swayed violently, its branches clawing at the night. For a moment, she saw something, a flicker of movement by the fence. Then nothing. She tried to tell herself it was just the wind. Still, she double-checked the locks before going to bed. The next morning, Harkins arrived at her doorstep. Maya's eyes widened when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" she asked, glancing down at Lily, who stood by her side holding Rex's leash. He hesitated. "Maya, Cole's out. I don't know how, but I think he's coming back." Her face went pale. "You can't be serious." "I wish I wasn't," he said. There was a fire. Someone sent a message. She shook her head. He wouldn't dare not after everything. Harkins's expression darkened. Cole doesn't care about rules anymore. He's got nothing left to lose. Rex growled again, low and deep, as if confirming his old handler's words. That evening, the sheriff's department issued a brief statement. Former Sergeant Nathan Cole has been released pending appeal. He remains under monitoring and poses no threat to the public. But the people of Willow Creek knew better. The verdict may have silenced the courtroom, but it had not silenced Cole's pride. He was seen once briefly at a diner off Highway 7, his reflection caught in a window. He didn't stay long. He never did. But the waitress swore she saw his eyes cold, calculating. The kind of eyes that remember. 3 nights later, Maya woke to the sound of Rex barking violently. The clock read 2:37 a.m. She ran to the window, heart pounding, and froze. Her porch light flickered on and off, the motion sensor triggered by something or someone moving just beyond the fence line. "Maya!" Harkins's voice came through the door, urgent. "It's me, open up." She exhaled shakily and unlatched the door. He rushed in, drenched from the rain, a gun holstered at his side. "We need to go," he said. "Now? What? Why?" He didn't answer immediately. He just handed her a folded note, sealed in a plastic bag. "This was left at the library this morning." She opened it with trembling fingers. Scrawled in block letters were the words, "You took my life. Now I'll take yours." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. "Oh my God." "We've got to move," Harkins said. "Pack what you need. I'll take you somewhere safe." Rex barked again, louder this time. His body stiffened, eyes locked on the front window. Then a sound. Tires crunching on gravel. Headlights sweeping across the living room wall. "He's here," Harkins breathed. The next few moments unfolded in silence, like a scene suspended in air. Harkins motioned for Maya to take Lily to the back door. Rex stayed by his side, tense, waiting. The headlights stopped just short of the driveway. The engine idled, then cut out. Rain fell harder, drumming on the roof like restless fingers. Through the glass, a shadow moved. "Stay behind me," Harkins whispered, raising his weapon. "If he tries to come in, we run." Maya nodded, clutching Lily close. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Then the unmistakable creak of a door opening. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, on wet gravel. Cole's voice drifted through the rain, calm, mocking. "You really thought you could erase me, Harkins? That you could walk away clean?" Harkins shouted back, "Don't do this, Cole. It's over." Cole laughed softly. "You think this is about the trial? No, this is about truth. You stole my dog. You stole my name. You stole everything." Rex snarled, teeth bared, recognizing the voice. Cole stepped closer, and for a flicker of a moment, Harkins saw the same man he once served under commanding, dangerous, unhinged. "Back away," Harkins warned. "I'm serious." But Cole didn't stop. "That mutt chose you over me?" he hissed. "You trained him to turn against his master." Lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene. Cole's face twisted with rage, his coat soaked through, one hand gripping something metallic. A gun. Harkins fired first. A sound shattered the night. Cole staggered, dropped the weapon, but didn't fall. He smiled through the pain. "That's the thing about storms," he rasped. "They always come back." He stumbled backward into the rain, then disappeared into the darkness beyond the fence. Rex bolted after him, barking wildly. Harkins ran to stop him, but it was too late. By dawn, the police had swarmed the area, but there was no sign of Cole. Only blood, rainwater, and tire marks leading toward the forest. Maya sat on the porch steps, trembling, holding Lily in her lap. Rex hadn't returned. "He'll find his way home," Harkins said quietly, though his voice betrayed doubt. Maya looked up at him, her eyes hollow but steady. "Do you think it'll ever end?" Harkins exhaled slowly, watching the gray horizon. "I don't know. Men like Cole, they don't stop. But I promise you this." He turned to her, determination hardening his voice. "As long as I'm breathing, he'll never touch you or Lily again." Far beyond the town, deep in the woods, a faint sound broke the quiet, a rustle, a low groan. Cole dragged himself through the mud, blood seeping through his jacket. His gun was gone, but his eyes still burned with fury. And there, in the distance, a pair of glowing amber eyes watched him. Rex stepped from the shadows, muscles coiled, lips curled back. For the first time, Cole looked afraid. "Easy, boy," he whispered, raising a shaking hand. But the dog didn't move. Thunder rolled overhead as the storm returned in full force. And somewhere between man and beast, vengeance waited to finish what justice could not. The storm hit with a vengeance that night, turning the forest into a black ocean of wind and rain. The trees bent low under the fury of it, their branches thrashing like the arms of drowning men. Thunder rolled through the hills, deep and unrelenting. Somewhere within that chaos, Nathan Cole was bleeding, limping, and laughing softly to himself. Every step sent fire up his leg, but he kept going. He had lived his life by control, by order, and now all that was left was chaos. Yet in that chaos, he felt alive again. He could still smell gunpowder on his coat. He could still see Harkins's face behind the muzzle flash. The betrayal cut deeper than the bullet. "Traitor," he hissed into the rain. "You and that woman. You took everything." Behind him, a low growl echoed through the storm. Cole froze. Slowly, he turned and saw two glowing eyes watching from the darkness. "Rex," he said, almost tenderly. "Good boy. You came back." The dog stepped forward, silent, muscles taut. Lightning illuminated his wet fur, the rain dripping from his snout. He was no longer the obedient canine that Cole once commanded. This was something else, an animal unchained, loyal not to orders but to justice. Cole smiled through the pain. "Still protecting them, huh? Still choosing them over me?" The growl deepened. The storm answered with thunder. Cole raised his trembling hand. "Go ahead," he whispered. "Do it." But Rex didn't move. Not yet. Miles away, Harkins slammed the cruiser door shut and radioed dispatch. Suspect last seen heading east through Red Hollow Woods. Armed, possibly injured. Requesting backup. Static crackled. "Copy that, Officer Harkins. Backup ETA 20 minutes. Make it 10, he snapped, grabbing the flashlight from the dash. He turned to Maya, who sat in the passenger seat, clutching Lily. The child was pale, her small hands tangled in Rex's empty leash. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. Maya shook her head. "I'm not letting you go alone. Not after everything. You have Lily to think about." "I am thinking about her," she said. "He came to our home. I won't live in fear anymore." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steel. Harkins hesitated, then nodded. "Stay in the car. If anything happens, drive. Don't wait." He turned and disappeared into the storm. The forest swallowed him whole. Every sound was amplified, the crack of branches, the hiss of rain through leaves, the distant growl of thunder. His flashlight beam cut through sheets of water, catching flashes of footprints in the mud heavy, uneven. Blood mixed with rainwater. "Cole," he called out, voice barely carrying over the wind. "It's over. You're bleeding out, let it end." No answer. Just the wind howling through the trees. Then a bark, short, sharp, "Rex." Harkins shouted, pushing forward. The dog appeared moments later, darting through the underbrush, fur slicked with rain. He barked again, insistent, and then ran ahead, glancing back once as if to say, "Follow." Harkins ran. Deep in the forest clearing, Cole had collapsed beside a fallen tree, breath ragged, vision blurring. The cold was seeping into him now, mixing with exhaustion and madness. He could hear sirens in the far distance faint, growing closer. He laughed again bitterly. "Justice," he muttered. "You think you know justice? You think it's about truth? No. It's about who gets to write it down." Rex emerged from the shadows, snarling now. Cole reached for his gun, but it was gone lost somewhere in the mud. "Fine," he whispered. "Let's finish this the old way." He lunged, grabbing a broken branch, swinging it wildly. Rex dodged, teeth flashing. Cole slipped in the mud, went down hard. The dog was on him in seconds, pinning him, growl vibrating through the storm. For a brief, insane moment, Cole looked into Rex's eyes and saw his own reflection, Anger, fear, the ghost of command. Then Rex backed off, stepping aside, as if saying, "I won't be you." Cole staggered to his knees. "You won't even finish it?" He spat. "Coward." That's when Harkins stepped into the clearing, flashlight cutting through the dark. "Drop it, Cole," he ordered. Cole turned, soaked and shaking. "You came," he said, voice cracking. "Good. I wanted you to see this." He charged. The world exploded into motion mud flying, lightning splitting the sky. Harkins fired once, the bullet grazing Cole's arm. He didn't stop. They collided, wrestling in the muck, fists and rage, and years of guilt crashing together. "You betrayed me," Cole screamed. "I saved us," Harkins shouted back. "You went too far." They rolled down a small embankment, crashing into a shallow creek. The current tore at them, rain pounding down in sheets. Cole got the upper hand, pressing Harkins's head under the water. "Justice." Cole roared. "You don't know the meaning of it." Rex lunged. He hit Cole square in the shoulder, knocking him off balance. The branch slipped from his grasp, and Harkins surged upward, gasping for breath. He grabbed the fallen weapon, holding it firm. Cole stared up at him, chest heaving, eyes wide with defiance. "Go ahead," he rasped. "Be the hero." Harkins hesitated. His finger trembled on the trigger. "I'm not you," he said softly. Behind him, blue and red lights flickered through the trees. Officers poured into the clearing, weapons drawn, voices shouting through the rain. "Hands where we can see them." "Don't move." Cole laughed again, a hollow, broken sound, and raised his hands. For a second, it seemed over. But then his right hand twitched toward his jacket. Harkins didn't think. He fired. The shot echoed through the forest like thunder. Cole fell backward, eyes wide, a single line of blood tracing down his cheek. The rain washed it away before it reached the ground. By dawn, the storm had passed. Cole's body was recovered from the creek. The coroner ruled it a justified shooting. The department released a short statement praising Harkins's bravery under duress. Reporters called it the final chapter in the Willow Creek scandal. But to those who had lived it, it didn't feel like an ending. Harkins stood at the edge of the forest as the sun broke through the clouds. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. Beside him, Rex sat silently, watching as a white tarp was lifted into an ambulance. Maya approached, her face pale but calm. "Is it over?" she asked. Harkins looked at the rising sun, the storm clouds parting to reveal streaks of gold. "Yeah," he said finally. "It's over." She knelt beside Rex, running her fingers through his damp fur. "He came back," she whispered. "He always would," Harkins said quietly. "That's who he is." They stood there together, the three of them survivors, bound not by blood, but by the shared weight of truth. Weeks later, Willow Creek began to heal. The courthouse steps bloomed with flowers. The town square held a vigil not for Cole, but for closure. Maya returned to work, Lily started kindergarten, and Rex became a quiet legend in town. Children whispered that he could sense danger before it happened. Adults didn't argue. Some truths didn't need explaining. Harkins left the department for good. He took a job as a park ranger, patrolling the forests he once feared. Some nights, when the wind shifted just right, he swore he could still hear the echoes of that storm, the shouts, the gunfire, the growl of loyalty stronger than fear. And on those nights, he'd whisper into the darkness, "Good boy, Rex, you did it." The forest would remain silent, peaceful. But deep within, under the roots and shadows, something else lingered, not evil, not sorrow, but memory. Because some storms never truly end. They just change the sky. The storm that had consumed Willow Creek left more than broken trees and flooded roads in its wake. It left ghosts. Not the kind that haunted with chains and shadows, but the kind that lived in photographs, whispered names, and the quiet pauses in conversation when memories became too heavy to voice. 3 years had passed since the night Nathan Cole died in the forest. The town had changed, yet somehow remained the same. The courthouse still stood, the diner still served its bitter coffee, and the air still carried that faint scent of pine and rain. But there was something gentler, now in ease, that had not existed before, a sense that the worst had come and gone, and the town had survived it. Maya Miles stood in front of the library's new mural that morning, a painting of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Below it was a plaque that read, "Dedicated to those who choose truth over silence." Her hands trembled slightly as she ran her fingers over the letters. The dedication had been her idea, though she hadn't taken credit. Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, look." "That's Rex." She pointed to the lower corner of the mural, where an artist had painted the silhouette of a German shepherd, head lifted, watching the sky. Maya smiled. "Yes, baby. That's him. Do you think he knows it's him?" Lily asked earnestly. Maya knelt down and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think he knows he's loved," she said. "And that's enough." Rex had grown slower with age, his muzzle silvering, his movements careful. But his eyes, those sharp amber eyes, still held the same alert warmth. He followed Lily everywhere now, from the library steps to the park by the creek. People waved when they saw them. To the children of Willow Creek, Rex was a hero. To Maya, he was a reminder that faith, even in the darkest hours, could take the shape of fur and loyalty. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Maya and Lily walked home through the golden haze of autumn. The leaves swirled around their feet, the world quiet except for the soft crunch of gravel and the rhythmic padding of Rex beside them. "Mommy," Lily said, skipping ahead, "do you think Daddy can see us?" Maya stopped for a moment. The question, though innocent, always landed like a whisper against an old wound. She looked toward the horizon, where the forest stood dark and endless. "Yes," she said softly. "I think he can." Lily smiled, satisfied. "Then he knows we're okay." Maya nodded, blinking away the tears that rose unbidden. "Yes, sweetheart, he knows." Miles away, deep within the woods that had once echoed with gunfire and screams, Officer-turned-Ranger Mark Harkins walked his evening patrol. The forest had regrown where the fire and flood had scarred it, the underbrush thick again, birds returning to the canopy. The creek, where Cole had fallen, ran clear now, its surface reflecting the pale blue of the fading sky. Harkins paused by the water's edge. He came here often not out of guilt anymore, but reverence. The place had taken on a strange peace, as if the forest itself had forgiven what men could not. He crouched, dipping his hand into the cold current. "You were right, Maya," he murmured. "Some things heal slower than others." Behind him, Rex barked once. Harkins smiled, turning to see Maya and Lily walking down the slope toward him. "You keep finding us, don't you?" Maya teased. Harkins shrugged. "Maybe the woods tell me where to go." Lily ran up and hugged his leg. "Mommy says you helped make the bad man go away." He knelt, looking into her bright, trusting eyes. "No," he said gently. "The truth did that. I just helped it find its way." She grinned, then turned to Rex. "Come on, boy. Race you to the bridge." Rex wagged his tail, and the two of them took off through the trees. Harkins and Maya followed, slower, the air between them easy now, no longer weighed by what they'd endured. As the years passed, the story of Willow Creek became something of a legend. News outlets revisited it each anniversary, documentaries dissected it, college courses debated it. But the people who had lived it rarely spoke of it anymore. They didn't need to. For Maya, life moved forward in small, deliberate steps. She finished her degree, became head librarian, and began organizing literacy programs for the town's children. She often said books had saved her words, had been her shelter when the world had become too loud. And so she built a sanctuary of them, one where truth wasn't something whispered in fear, but spoken freely. For Harkins, redemption came quietly. He became a respected ranger, known for his calm and steady manner. He'd never married, but he visited Maya and Lily often, sometimes bringing supplies, sometimes just stories from the woods. People assumed they were family, and in a way, they were. And Rex remained the soul of the story. When he passed, it was a spring morning. The sun was gentle, the air filled with the hum of bees. Maya found him lying by the porch, head resting on his paws, eyes closed as if in sleep. There was no struggle, no sound, just stillness. Lily, now 8, wept in her mother's arms, clutching Rex's old leash. Harkins came quietly and knelt beside them, his eyes glistening. "He stayed until he knew you were safe," Harkins said softly. "That's what dogs do." They buried him beneath the old oak at the edge of the yard, the same one where he'd stood guard so many nights. Maya carved a small plaque herself. Rex, guardian, friend, hero. And for a long while after, the house felt impossibly quiet. One evening, months later, Maya found herself walking the forest trail alone. The sunset burned orange through the branches, and the creek whispered in the distance. She reached the bridge where everything had once ended and begun again, and paused. The wind moved softly through the leaves. Somewhere, she thought she heard a bark. Just faint, almost playful. She smiled. "You still keeping watch, boy?" A rustle answered her, no more than the sound of the forest breathing. But it was enough. When she turned back toward town, the lights of Willow Creek glowed warm through the trees. It no longer felt like a place of tragedy, but one of resilience, a town reborn through the courage of ordinary people who had refused to look away. Years later, a new generation would walk those same streets without fear. They'd see the mural on the library wall and ask about the dog painted beneath the storm clouds. Teachers would tell them, "That's Rex. He saved a little girl once." And the children would smile, because heroes like that never really disappear. On the 10th anniversary of the verdict, the town gathered for a memorial at the courthouse steps. Maya, older now, stood at the podium, her voice steady. "10 years ago," she began, "we were afraid. Afraid of speaking up, afraid of what the truth might cost. But fear didn't win. Justice didn't come from power, it came from people. Ordinary people who refused to stop believing that what's right is worth fighting for." She paused, glancing down at the front row, where Harkins sat beside Lily now, a bright-eyed teenager. Her hand resting on the leash of a young German shepherd named Echo. Maya smiled. "This town has weathered storms, but storms don't destroy us. They reveal who we are." Applause rippled through the crowd. Some cried. Some simply nodded. As the ceremony ended, Maya stepped away, looking toward the horizon. The clouds above were streaked with gold and violet, the kind of sky that always followed a storm. She felt a quiet peace settle in her chest, the kind that comes when the past no longer hurts, only hums softly, reminding you that you lived through it. Beside her, Harkins joined her gaze. "Beautiful night," he said. "It is," she whispered. "Almost too calm." He chuckled. "You think another storm's coming?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but this time we'll be ready." They stood together in the fading light, the town behind them humming with life, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. And somewhere, beyond the forest, beyond the edge of hearing, came the faint echo of a bark steady, familiar, proud. The sound of a guardian who never truly left. Fade to black.